Welcome to EX plus CX equals the reality of your business with Scott Backer from Ziegler Companies. Scott is here to explore the important connection between engaged employees and satisfied customers and how dealerships can leverage it for long-term success. Scott is the Customer Experience Manager at Ziegler Caterpillar, where he leads initiatives to enhance both customer and employee experiences, shaping what is known as the Ziegler Experience. With a strong background in customer experience, service design, and business strategy, Scott has held leadership roles across industries such as health insurance, employee benefits, SaaS startups, and health and wellness apps. At Ziegler, he focuses on optimizing the retail experience from curb to counter, ensuring that people remain at the heart of the business evolution and change. And with that, please welcome Scott.
Awesome. Thank you for the introduction and welcome to this amazing summit. It's been a pretty awesome morning so far. So hopefully people are still with it. If we were in person, this would be the point I would challenge you to turn to your neighbor and play a rousing game of rock, paper, scissors. Let's make sure we're keeping the energy high. But with that, I just want to jump in and keep this going. I'll give you a little bit of background on the company itself. And you can advance one more. So I like to use animations. I blame it on my graphic design background. So we'll put Michelle on her toes. Go ahead and hit next, please.
Yep.
Awesome. So a little bit about us. We're actually Ziegler Companies. Most people do know us in the upper Midwest as Ziegler Cat. We're the primary cat dealer in Minnesota and most of Iowa, but we do have 6 divisions. We were established in 1914 here in Minneapolis. We do predate cat by 10 years, which is interesting in of itself. We are a privately held company, and we actually are in our 3rd generation of family leadership. We do cover the 2 states plus a little bit there down in Northwest Missouri. And we have over 30 locations today with just around 2,400 employees. And when we think about Ziegler as a company, I like to joke, we're probably the biggest, least known company in the upper Midwest. So with that, I'm going to leverage some quotes to help frame up what I'm going to talk about. And this quote in particular resonates deeply. It came from Charlie Godfrey of Genesis there. And when we think about what it is a company, what's the corporation, what's the business, so on and so forth, I think a lot of times we don't do ourselves a service, and we don't talk about a company is actually a collection of people, right? It's all these touch points that identify us as logos, brands, locations, buildings, but a company really is people delivering on that. So go to the next slide, please. I like to use this graphic that I created many years ago to illustrate the most basic function of any business, and that's really to create opportunities. And while there's it's a balance and blend of internal and external, the employee experience, as we heard previously, is what generates the customer experience and ultimately creates that reality experience for your business. So within our respective industries and even in the markets, there's always a person at the center of every outcome. And those interactions can cause some chaos, they can cause some pain and suffering. But at the end of the day, I think it's where we need to really focus as business leaders and ensure that we're thinking about that person's perspective. We really got to hone in on what it is that they want and what it is that they need, because we also know that as humans go, we don't always articulate that very well. And then I also want to share sort of 2 working definitions that we have incorporated inside of Ziegler. Employee experience is what the person thinks about the company and how they feel about the work they do. And that is completely stolen, built on Shep Hyken's definition of customer experience. And that is what a person thinks about the company and how they feel having done business with you. And again, alluding to the earlier presentations, right? We buy products and services because of how it makes us feel. Sometimes it's directly correlated to the product or service, but more often than not, it's the entire experience. Do we feel valued? Do we feel seen? Do we feel heard? And so I think bringing clear language and definitions into your business around what the employee experience is and what customer experience is will ultimately support your corporate branding, your logos, your mission, your vision, your strategies, all the pieces in that. So as we move forward into the next slide, I'm going to share an example that we brought into Ziegler. I was exposed to value chains inside this particular company in this format, and it was really eye-opening. As you can see, we're visual learners, most of us, and so we'll rely on a picture telling us 1,000 words. I don't have the poll, but I'm going to open up a question for everybody. When you think about this journey, right, for the customer to get all the way to having his piece of equipment repaired and back up and running, how many employees potentially do you think are involved in executing this journey at any given time? And this isn't a question that throws a lot of my coworkers off because they're like, when I drop the answer, they're like, there's no way. But if you think about your own service experiences, there's probably in the neighborhood of 30 to 40 individual employees that could potentially impact this journey. And who are they? And that's the question that you want to start asking, like, who are these people? What are they doing that has an impact on the outcome? And then ultimately, where are you seeing these gaps and where are the opportunities to innovate? The example that we're showing, most likely employees that are missed are those people that we often forget about. Who hired all these employees to begin with? So there's an HR component. There's also a finance component from the AP and AR sides, as well as purchasing. There's an entire service network or backstage from IT and user support and other functional groups that keep all the systems and technology up and running. And so as you lay this out and you start to understand the complexity of a simple journey like this, it's easy to understand too that every employee ultimately matters. And we want our employees to understand that you don't have to be external customer facing to be a customer service contributor, excuse me. So we'll move to the next slide and show you some more examples. Another quote, because if I think about my journey within Ziegler, it really comes down to this quote. I was new to the industry, but not new to the construction world or the ag world, having grown up and around it, but new to this industry, new to this company. And we are very large. It is the proverbial battleship in a bathtub scenario. And I was the first one of my type in this job, in this role ever in 110 years of company history. So I had to start somewhere. And it literally was like, well, this is who I am. This is why I was hired. And I think the beauty of this quote also talks to the employee and customer experience are always creating this dynamic blend of what if and why not lines of thinking, seeing, and doing that converge into an overall experience. For us, it was defining the Ziegler experience, and that is the business reality. So in the next couple slides, I'm going to actually show you some real life examples of things that I've been involved in or perhaps just done by myself. And I want to leave off with some strategic thoughts as well. Being intentional to me is in a strategic approach to building broad project teams. I really think that we fail when we're not intentional. And what I mean by that is that we're not recognizing and amplifying employees who care to care. Like they just show up. They're passionate about what they do. They have a strong sense of self. And more often than not, they're pretty bold without being reckless. So I would encourage you to think about them in a different light and start by bringing them into projects, but not as subject matter experts. Instead, bring them in as invested and engaged contributors with a very distinct or unique perspective. And in doing so, you can round out the conversations in the project team so that it actually becomes more dialed in and ultimately more designed to create the experience that you're seeking. This is an opportunity for us as business leaders in particular to really seek out the bias to serve, right? I'm a firm believer that customer service is an attitude, it's not a department. So who are those people that might roll up their sleeves and do things that surprise you in positive ways? And then we also heard in the previous presentations about what I call a random acts of kindness. You don't have to make a grand gesture to recognize somebody's contribution. A simple attaboy or attagirl or thank you goes a long way. And more often than not, when said face to face, it carries so much gravity and it gives that person just that little bit more gas in the tank or initiative to keep going. And then last, I think around project teams, the biggest opportunity is for us to be gracious about failure. I don't see failure as a negative. I just simply can't. I think failure in a lot of ways is just it's another form of feedback, and it's understanding new information. I've got a new input or I've got a new insight. And so it didn't go as planned. Okay, but we're moving forward and we're constantly always looking for the next phase to get better. This is a visual example of that. So we as a company had been collecting customer feedback. Caterpillar has a very prescriptive program called transactional survey. And I'm kid you not, I inherited about 15 years of customer data, verbatims and scores that no one had ever looked at. And it was interesting because I was like, well, isn't this what we do? You know, we ask, we listen, and then we respond. Well, we all know the answer to that because nobody was looking at it. So I challenged the company at one point. I was talking to some business leaders. I'm like, the number two pain point as voiced by our customers is poor communication. Specifically, they state, why do I have to call you about my machine in your shop? And that was, yeah, that's a really great question. And it's pretty silly that we're forcing customers to do it. So this graphic represents what we call the future service office. We created a whole process. We identified individuals. And the person at the center of this is what's called a service advisor. And their role is to be the nexus on behalf of the customer. So the customer conversations more or less starts with them. They are managing all the internal flow, communication, updates, parts, service, all the pieces. And then they're contributing to the final outcome. Hey, customer, your machine's ready, or this is what's going on. So proactively, we're communicating to the customer. Now, this is not all sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns, right? This involves a lot of people, a lot of change management, and it's still a bit messy. But I can say that since going live and fully deploying across every one of our applicable branches, the customer complaint around communication is no longer the number two pain point. It typically sits around 4 to 5, maybe even 6. So the win there is listen. And don't just listen and think, yeah, okay, great. Listen to affect change. Our customers' time is critically important. And I'm a big believer that the pandemic taught a lot of us that painful lesson that we simply don't have as much time as we think we do. And if you're a business owner, your time is money. So I also will quantify this as our future service office prevents Ziegler from stealing time and hence money from our own customers. If you have more questions about the future service office, I'd be happy to talk to you more about it and show you how that's made. But we're going to pivot to my favorite thing, and it's about creativity. Every single human has the capacity for creativity, and this is not in like the arts perspective. It's creativity in thinking outside of a box or thinking differently. And in this time, I'm also talking about get creative with what you do for your employees. How are you creating time and space for their true self to show up? If you think about those employees that are engaged, what are we doing to bring them into more conversation, to give them more opportunity to see the business holistically? The strategic approach that I'm putting out here is really built around change management. I'll be the first one to tell everybody that I'm a huge ad card nerd. Love it. Shout out to my hometown also, Fort Collins, Colorado. But more critically, there's flexibility in thinking creatively. So something I want to put out there is a condensed version where we think of all these change management models, and I call it IDEA. Identify who are your amplifiers or who are those change agents that can really help multiply and drive a lot of change effectively, but also responsibly. Define it. Define means collaborate, get a consensus to gain clarity about the outcome. You may go into a project thinking it's this, but through conversation, you realize that it's this and this, or conversely, it's not that, it's actually this. And I think a lot of project teams struggle with this because early on, it's almost like we go, here's the project, here's the idea, and then we just jump into solution mode. But you got to spend time thinking about that and getting clear. And then engaging. We've been talking all morning about connecting really hearts and heads inside of our employees and consequently inside our customers. So When you connect the heart and the mind, I believe that's actually where innovation really sparks because you get people passionate about expressing what matters to them and their perspective on a solution or potential problem or both. So really spend some time to bringing them out and be honoring what they have to say. Sometimes it may not make sense, but it's still, if they brought it up, it clearly matters to them. And then activate. This is really where the rubber hits the road for everyone on this call. We need to tie these outcomes to the business. And I use the term real dollars and real cents. And what that means is that dollars and profit and revenue and all the things that associate with a dollar sign are the love language of our executives. So you have to connect the CX, the EX, and the business's reality to those dollars and cents. Next slide, please. So what are we looking at? Well, we've got what's called the Customer Experience Ambassador Program within Ziegler. And I went from 0 to 1,000 miles an hour on this. I set a goal of getting 500 employees involved in this through training and then ongoing participation. We hit some headwinds, not going to lie. Still ended up with 397 employees that stepped up and said, you know what, I want to learn more. And I want to understand what you mean, Scott, by customer experience and employee experience. And ultimately, this ambassador program supports the culture of Ziegler. We have shared values, behaviors, and attitudes around building better experiences, around supporting internal and external constituents equally. And it also actually helped us reframe the company culture a little bit because this company, like your companies, only exists because you have customers. If you don't have customers, you have no business, you have no reason to exist. So bringing together employees around real challenges that based on customer verbatim or VOC feedback, whatever you want to call it, to actually take a look at a problem that a customer has voiced. Perhaps it serves as a proxy, but then to start thinking through it. What is it that we don't like about this if we were in the customer's shoes? What is it that we don't like about it, knowing what we know about our work and our roles? Ultimately, to get to the point of what if we tried something called X, Y, and Z, or why not go do A, B, and C? So as ambassadors go, why I love this slide so much is that we provide the visual cues and reminders across the entire organization of why we're Ziegler Companies and what we do. For whom? All the time. So buttons, stickers, there's magnets, there's recurring newsletter articles. I have a SharePoint site. I send out a lot of what I call FFT communications. FFT is food for thought. As you know, in our industries, we love acronyms like nobody's business. And then we're also leveraging some internal digital signage where I'm copying, pasting actual customer verbatim, and we're just broadcasting it internally in our break rooms. And the intent here is to be a constant reminder that without customers, Ziegler does not exist. And even though we've been around for 110 years, there is absolutely zero guarantee that this could last. And we know the changing dynamic behind generational needs and expectations is also an opportunity for our ambassadors to start future-proofing the entire organization, adopting technology, trying different things to get in closer to the customer, in closer into the time of the moment that matters, perhaps. So if you're, again, interested in how we stood up an ambassador program, I'd be happy to show you what we did. And also very, very happy that this is still generating quite a bit of buzz. And we got a lot more people that are volunteering to show up. So the last strategic approach I call measuring reality. And it comes down to this. We have to make our lives easier for our employees, right? There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of turmoil. There's a lot of things that everybody is just dealing with because we're humans and we have lives to live. So recognizing that sometimes the best that you're going to get out of them is what you're getting out of them, and being flexible and being kind and considerate. Because in not doing so, the likelihood that their attitude changes and affects a customer's experience goes up astronomically. And these are not revelations for probably anybody on this call, but it's a good reminder, right? That to grow the business, you have to look at the employee and customer side equally. because they are working in concert at every single touch point. So my challenge to you is, are you measuring business outcomes? Are you actually measuring the moments that matter, like churn or retention? Or are you simply chasing vanity metrics? Second, do you know of and are you consistently recognizing engaged employees? This doesn't require a formal relationship. Do you see somebody behaving with high safety and you say, hey, I really appreciate that? Or do you see somebody going out of their way to help a lost customer who's randomly walking through the lobby? All these things is simply a reminder of like, yeah, we're in this together. And the smallest gesture adds up over time. Those employees create a wealth of opportunities, most of the time unseen and certainly unheralded. So let's amplify that. And then last, commit to growing the business through value that matters to the customer. And this is a big challenge because, well, typically we are looking at profitability through a very specific lens or through a very specific perspective. And what we've learned over the last 4 or 5, even maybe 6 years now is customers don't care. They don't care what the business thinks and wants. It's about them. And that's absolutely true. So they have all the buying power. We've seen that in the previous presentations. They are very fickle, as we all are. We understand that. And so when you commit to understanding what the value exchange actually means to the other individual, you can go do something with that. It takes time and it takes a lot of effort. But if your executives care about future proofing the company, they're going to make time and energy and effort for that. They've got to stay connected to the reality and not just hear it anecdotally up through the employee experience and through a chain of command. So with that, you'll have deeper partnerships and absolutely a shared success, because I also believe that when our customers are successful, we will be successful, which goes all the way back to William H. Ziegler's famous quote of the exact same thing. And in closing, big fan of Shep Hyken, if you haven't picked that up, but he put this out in one of his books. That the brand is defined by the customer's experience, and that experience is absolutely delivered by the employees. So with that, I'm going to pause and open it up for questions.
I'm going to jump in and steal the first one, Scott, and then
Absolutely.
great job. Thank you so much. Great information. I have this belief, and I don't know, and I'm sure it's not everywhere, but I do have this belief that we are always so excited to serve our customers and to bend over backwards and do whatever they need us to do to make sure that they're smiling, but maybe don't have the same level of commitment to our employees and our team members, and maybe not the same level of flexibility because, they're getting a paycheck and they need to be here and they need to have a smile on their face all the time. Any thoughts about how organizations that don't have that beautiful blend of employee and customer focus get there? How do they change that culture?
That is the actual challenge, right? And I always go back to, you ultimately you have to look at your hiring. You've got to bring the people in that want to deliver that brand and level of experience. So it's not practical, right? Because you can't just start letting people go and rebuilding teams. But I think you have to work that from both ends. So certainly start with finding the next group of really engaged people that want to be here, that again, they have a bias to serve, or they bring that customer service attitude to the table. Consequently, with your existing workforce, I think it's worth everybody's time to get to know those people, right? Like they might have been that way. Something happened along the way where maybe they're checking out or they're not engaged. I have had great success as the only CX nerd in the entire company of being able to go up to anybody and just say, tell me about yourself. Who are you? What role do you do? And I have like 3 questions after what's your name? Because that's always a nice thing, right? But the last question I always ask is like, what makes you memorable in your job or in your role? And that can throw people, but at least it's a genuine connection. Like, I want to understand where you're at. And then I can ask more specific questions of like, oh, I've heard stories, like you're really good at this. where you struggle with this though, like, so it's just about being human at the end of the day, having those conversations. It's not going to connect with everybody, and so I think that's the other challenge is we don't have to connect with everybody, but I do want everybody to be seen, and I do want everybody inside the company to have an opportunity to be heard. And if I can be that conduit between, any business leader or business unit and HR, I'll fill that void every single time.
So do you think it's critical to have a Scott in every organization that's responsible for that?
Maybe not this guy, but something like this. Yeah, I do because I'm an equalizer, right? I can bring the balance of business acumen and understanding of business continuity and stress to the human side of it. And so if you can build, maybe it's a person or maybe it's a small group inside your business units. For example, I sit inside our marketing team. I've got my tribe, that I can talk to. Maybe I don't have a conduit to our product team, but I know one of those people does. So yeah, you've got to find those people that aren't afraid to get out there once in a while and ask some hard questions. I find that humor goes a long way, as I always like to joke with people before I meet them, like I have a face for radio and a voice for the silent films, but hear me out and let's just have a conversation.
Thank you. Hey, you've been fantastic.